Welcome into the Trevor Staub Show, episode number 4. Today we have a great guest. We've got Catrina Allen, fresh off of her win at the Las Vegas Challenge. We're going to talk to Catrina, ask her about her win, ask her about her switch to DGA, and all kinds of other fun stuff. So let's check it out. All right, and we're here now with two-time world champion and the recent Las Vegas Challenge champion, Catrina Allen. Congratulations on the win, and thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get into Las Vegas Challenge, I kind of want to start with the off season a little bit, just because for you this was a different off season than it's kind of been in the recent years. There was a big move, obviously, switching from Prodigy to DGA. So I just kind of wanted to gauge a little bit of how that went for you. And just to start, you were with Prodigy for the majority of your career. A really long time. We're kind of synonymous with that brand. So what kind of told you that, it was time to move on and look for another option?
So it actually was just an opportunity that was brought to me. I wasn't actually really looking or thinking about switching. And then once me and Scott Kesey got on some calls and, they kind of let me know what they were thinking. It just was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. And it's almost more like a partnership than a sponsorship. Yeah. I'm just involved in so much, when they were making my riffs, they're like, do you want them, domey or flat or in between, or how are they flying? Are you sure you like them? Do you want them different? I'm just so involved, and that's really what's been so awesome.
Yeah, and that's great. And it's, sometimes we've been seeing that a lot, where disc golfers are being presented with a lot of new opportunities these days that are just hard to pass up for sure. But moving from Prodigy to DGA, you threw Prodigy for so long, those molds were such a big part of your bag. How difficult was it to replace those molds that were part of your game for so long? And was it fun? Was it challenging, or even frustrating at times?
So actually, because I did the same thing when I first started with Prodigy. They just released discs, they had some drivers and then they had some mids, whatever. So what I did is those just were non-existent to me anymore. There was going to be no stepping up once the season started, being like, oh, I wish I had my whatever for this hole, say hole 1 at Vegas or something. So I just put all that aside and just learn the DGA discs for what they were. And I think that was a really good way to approach it, because it was just really fun. I keep telling people DGA doesn't have a lot of molds, but what they do have, they've perfected, and they take so much time and pride into making the new mold. So I actually don't have anything but DGA in my bag. And I think it took me 3 days to build a bag. And after those 3 days, I just kind of didn't really add anything or add any molds or add any new discs. I just wanted to perfect, or really understand how all of those flew, and just took them, what did I have, about a month of just field work and throwing them in all the, different winds and things like that.
Yeah. And do you think that when you were building your bag, was there ever, you said you kind of started from scratch, you tried to wipe out what your preconceptions of what your old bag was, but have you found that your new bag kind of mirrors similar disc slots that you had before, or is it almost a different, kind of a new look to the bag that you had, previously, and are you throwing kind of different shots now?
That's a really good question. Like I said, I tried to just I didn't want to be looking for a DGA mold that matched, say, like a Lavender X1 that's just a random rare Prodigy disc.
Right.
So I just was like, I'm just going to build a bag similar, obviously, because, and then when I step up to practice and prepare for a tournament, I'm just going to be like, what in my DGA bag fits this hole? How can I attack this hole with the bag I have now? Instead of being out on tour and starting to get frustrated and worrying about not having a mold. I feel like especially as someone who feels like they're stronger on the tee, I should be able to attack a hole with the bag I have.
Yeah, and I think that's an important mindset to carry in, is kind of wipe your previous thoughts, because it would be easy to get hung up. You get up to a hole thinking about, ooh, I
Yeah.
wish I had this disc that I used to have, where you have to completely reset and go, okay, this is what I have in my bag. What can I use best? And that's probably a lot harder for some people to get over that hurdle, especially when you've
Yeah.
been with a company for so long. But so you mentioned you made the switch pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So when you got to LVC at the Las Vegas Challenge, how confident were you in that bag? Was it ever in the back of your mind at all that you were going in with a new bag? Did you feel like you were at a disadvantage, or were you fully confident?
No, I was actually fully confident. I actually got um, 2 practice rounds on each course.
Hmm.
And so I got to play. Actually, there were 2 days where it was like 25 to 35 mile an hour winds. And
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of annoying because it's really frustrating to get a game plan in those conditions. But it was super helpful for me who had a new bag.
Yeah.
So, like, Austin was even like, do you think we should even practice? It's not going to be like this for the tournament. And I'm like, I would love to know what my DJ discs are doing in these conditions. Yeah,
Hmm.
in the field in 75-degree weather in Arizona with like 4 mile an hour wind, they were flying amazing, but I wanted
Yeah.
to make sure. And thanks to the hurricane and the hypercane, I was set.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now jumping into the event, kind of looking round by round, you started off with 2 really good rounds to open up. You were kind of almost cruising after that second round. Things were looking really good. That third round, you stumbled a little bit, just couldn't quite get anything going. After something happens like that in an event, because it's very common for any player trying to, having that kind of stumble round, how are you able to sort of reset your mentality and sort of forget what happened to focus on the task ahead? Because even after that stumble round, you're still right in the mix.
Well, and I was definitely just a little frustrated after the third round.
Hmm.
I actually started and felt great after the first couple holes. And then we really waited a lot that round. And I'm not
Mm.
going to lie, as someone who prides myself in like no excuses and doing the best with what we're, dealing with on the course, I felt like I got very almost like too relaxed because of the like 10 to 15 minute wait on every
Hmm.
hole. And I just made some very, very silly mistakes. Not even like not trusting my disc or whatever, just very like not as focused and in the moment as I was the first 2 rounds. Um, so I just kind of after the round reflected, and then I was like, well, that was the worst round I've played all season, and I'm still in the hunt. And I think sometimes I'm better when we're like within a stroke going down the
Mm.
stretch, because it's like when I start getting, 2, 3, 4 strokes, I'm like, don't mess it up, as opposed to
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, okay, I got to just focus on me because it's, we're right here. We're really close. So
Yeah.
maybe it was
Absolutely.
a
And it,
blessing in the end. I didn't have to stress
yeah.
about blowing a lead instead of just like, hey, we're tied going in the last round. Whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, it does seem. I mean, playing with the lead is very difficult. It always
Hmm.
seems like you almost don't want to be in that spot too early. You don't want to peak
Right.
too early, and that's it's a good point mentioning about. We actually hear a lot about the weights on a course almost after the fact, because when you're watching coverage, or especially if it's post-produced coverage, that's never going to be factored into it.
Right.
But it seems like a common thing I hear just when I talk to touring players, if they have a bad round, that having those long waits in between can be very brutal, because it gives you that opportunity to A, cool down. Your body's going to tighten up a little bit. Those days where it was a little windier,
Yep.
as they mentioned a million times on coverage, you had the heated jacket. So at
Yep.
least you had that going for
It
you.
is the
But
best investment I've made in a long time.
yeah, it was the play for sure. But
Yeah.
and then the other thing it gives you the chance to do is now you're sitting there behind the tee and you're looking at that shot, and you can go through a million different second
Yeah.
guesses
Yeah.
as you're thinking through. So that's definitely kind of the unspoken factor there
Yeah.
when it comes to what can happen in a round. But when I look at the stats of you over the whole tournament, it kind of seemed like a classic win for you. You kind of out threw everybody, and while your putting wasn't the top of the statistics for everybody, you overcome that with your ability to hit fairways, stay in bounds, and gain those strokes tee to green. However, from what I saw watching the coverage, it seemed like the putting for you, it was like you were making the putts when you needed to make them in the big moments.
Yeah.
Make the long eagle putt, or make that good par save. And that's what I noticed the most, was that it seemed like you're just making the putts that you had to make. Do you feel like you have a different confidence in your putting this year, or have you changed your approach at all? How does the putt feel this year?
Um, I don't know. And I have to be 100% honest. Um, like, I feel like it's just something for some reason people like to focus on. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like I've always been a great putter. Like,
All right.
maybe.
Hey.
And I always have thought, like, okay, I'm one of the most consistent player of the year, world championship. So, like, I don't, do you know what I'm
Well,
saying? Like,
yeah.
yeah, I
Bottom
understand
line,
if I made all of my putts, I'd probably win every single weekend, but like, I'm
right?
still consistently beating people who are better putters than me. So maybe it's just, I don't, does that make sense? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I
No, I get what
definitely
you're
feel
saying. Like, well, the
confident.
bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bottom line is you have to be able to putt to win a world title or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to be able to step up and knock down a putt to win an event, and that there's something always to be said for that.
Yeah.
I think what definitely gets picked up the most is just the fact that even when you're not leading statistics in putting, you're not one of the best putters on tour consistently.
Right.
It's your throwing that overcomes that, and I noticed personally that it seemed like. And maybe it was just the way coverage was operating, but it seemed like
Yeah.
you were making a lot of really well-timed putts
Yeah.
in big moments during the event.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I definitely worked my butt off on putting.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just more consistent than I have been. Like I said, I've always felt like I've had great putting rounds and great, like think of Jonesboro last year and
Yeah.
obviously. I just think also I have a lot more putts for birdie, and those can be more
Yeah.
stressful than say a putt where you're putting for par or bogey. And I've always thought like, okay, yeah, you can be a great putter, but if you just went out of bounds, that putt, so you just lost, 2 or more strokes, as opposed to if I'm putting for birdie, I might not even be losing a stroke if I miss
Yeah.
the putt. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is a good point.
Yeah.
Like if you look at some of the players that do lead in the putting statistics, they're certainly not putting for birdie quite as much.
Yeah.
So that does make a difference, absolutely.
Yeah.
But so
like I said, I have been focusing on putting this off season. I did putt for an hour, like 5 times a week for a good 3 weeks. And I do feel like it's really close to being where I want it to. But like you said, I did feel like there was like some 30 footers, some circle 2 putts, and even just like that awkward 23 footer that I made a lot of great when I really, really needed to. I do remember that rough round. I threw a great roller on this longer par 3 that we play, and it was out of bounds long, and I had a low ceiling, and the wind was like ripping, and I made like a circle's edge, low ceiling putt for par. So yeah, I think you're right. I do think that's something maybe I didn't even realize.
Yeah, well,
is that
the media is picking up on it. So yeah. But so going kind of towards the end of the event there, we kind of saw a classic finish, you versus Paige tied into the last hole. It immediately reminded me of last year's Worlds. It's a little bit different because you were tied this time. Yep. But going into that hole 18, kind of what was your strategy set in stone when you stepped up to the tee box, or was it kind of like you were gauging out to see what Paige was going to do? At any point, did it change during that hole, or what was going through your mind there?
No, not at all. The only thing I did was I was thankful for a backup in that moment, because I walked up, and that hole is very tricky because if you get something too wide, I mean, I don't know how much the coverage shows this, but it looks like you have a lot of room on the right side. But if you get that disc too far right and too flat and not high enough, you can't really see the pond on the right side of the fairway. And the first round, I made that mistake. And I have known for years that you have to saw it off left. You have so much room left. And so I just took a second and walked up and just like visually got a spot, and then walked back to the tee box and just was like, do not be afraid to go left, because I didn't want to go out of bounds off the tee. So my first plan was just get in bounds no matter what. And then I actually executed it exactly how I wanted off the tee, but I was a little bit further back than I'd like to be to attack the pin. Right. So I just was like, I know I can, get a nice flip up hyzer up there and get within 100. So if I, say she parked it, I could run it. If not, I just really felt like a 4 was going to be just fine. Playoff at worst.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely, it was a great hole 18. It really set up for a lot of different scenarios, both for the FPO and MPO. It ended up being a huge factor. But yeah, I think once it got to Paige, I always knew she was going to go for it. So I was just curious to know if it ever changed your strategy or anything like that. But
Yeah, no, I guess, and I think, um, the year before I was too aggressive and went out of bounds, and she threw it, or because I think she went out of bounds a couple of times, if I remember right, the year
yeah,
before,
yeah,
and then I think, I don't like to really talk about other players, and I try my hardest just to always focus on my game and staying within my abilities. But she also threw it out of bounds during our first round. So I knew that is such a tough shot from down there. Even though it's reachable
absolutely.
and capable, there's just the green, the pond, the OB
Yeah,
right
a
by
lot
the
of
basket, the
variables.
elevation, the
Hmm.
wind. So I did feel like just getting it inbounds was the best thing I could do.
Yeah, and it ended up being for both the FPO and MPO winners, the safe play won.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the theme there. But so getting that win, this is obviously the first Pro Tour event of the season, and with you switching sponsors, there's always going to be a bit of a spotlight on you, and
Yeah.
especially with all of the European players coming back, there's extra spotlight and expectation. So how does it feel, getting that first win of the season and getting that pressure off your shoulders? Like, do you feel like you kind of are just set up to attack the rest of the season now that you have that first one out of the way?
Um, I don't know. It's such a long season. I try to just like stay so much in the moment and in the week.
Hmm.
And I actually thought I was like, all the, talk about the Europeans. I was almost like, that's pressure off of me, actually. Because
True,
people were
true, yeah.
saying, like they're going to come over and dominate. It won't even be fair and all these things. And I was like, okay, yeah, sweet. No, I'll be in the gym and I'll be putting and you guys just keep talking about them, like
Yeah.
I don't, the less pressure, the better. But actually, I think something that's really been helpful for me is that when I made the switch and was, negotiating and talking, they told me DGA was like, you've already accomplished everything, and no one can take those titles away from you. So these next 4 years, we just want to celebrate those past wins and celebrate your accomplishments and tell the disc golf community who you are on the course, but also off the course.
That's
And
awesome.
kind of without saying it, like no pressure. You don't have
Yeah.
to do anything. You've already done it. You're already established. And then, yeah, they've just been so supportive. I feel like that I'm kind of taken pressure off of myself on the course.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I actually have been hearing that a lot from other players that I've talked to. A lot of these new deals that are coming along, they're really making sure to emphasize that we're investing in you as a player because we believe in what you've already accomplished and who
Right.
you are. And it's not so much, backed into a corner. We need you to win. We need this and that. And it's so much easier to play under those circumstances when you know that your company backs you for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So since it's already kind of a storyline that's back in the spotlight, I just wanted to briefly mention the whole Cat versus Paige narrative. And what I wanted to just ask you mostly is, it gets brought up because of just where you end up in the standings, typically tournament to tournament. There's not really anything else that fuels it. So I just wanted to say, like, between you guys, is there really anything there? Is there a sense? Do you ever feel a sense of rivalry? I guess is what I'm asking, or is it just completely fueled by the fans and the media?
For me, myself, I guess I've always just like taken it as like an individual sport and stayed within my game. I'm thinking me versus the course, me
Hmm.
versus, my capabilities. What can I do? Um, and no, not for me. I'm not good in those situations. Like anything like negative or like thinking about, as long as I beat her, everything's good. Nothing like
Yeah, yeah.
that. Um, and I just think we've both been on tour the longest and
Hmm.
we've both just really enjoyed trying to, I think we both have that same competitive, like, don't tell us we can't do it. And we've always
Yeah.
tried to like throw farther, throw the rollers, you know, I think we just, yeah, I think it's more like that. And that's why you catch us up here. But
Right.
I mean, no, I think, I don't know about her, but if Paige is on my card, I'm always like, sweet, we've been playing together for 12 years. It's going to
Yeah.
be really smooth, really easy, you know?
Yeah,
So
it's
I
one of
hate to
those
ruin
things.
everyone's.
No, it's one of those things where
Yeah.
there's a lot of rivalries like that in sports where the only reason it gets even the word rivalry gets thrown out there is because you've been so competitive with each other and so far above the rest for
Yeah.
years and years to where it's not like there was ever like any altercation that started some
Yeah.
rumor or narrative. It's just the fact that there's great competition.
Yeah.
And regardless of any rivalry, like I said, it's impossible to ignore just the dominance that both of you have had over the last decade. You know, you've dominated events, and it's just we've kind of been in this, like, you know, we do a podcast and every week we're doing predictions, and it's like, okay, do I want to pick Paige then Cat or Cat then Paige? Like it's very much like over and over again for years now.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the European players got so much attention
For sure.
when they were coming over, is because a lot of fans, from a fan perspective, are thinking, okay, maybe this is going to shake things up. This is going to make it a lot more interesting. Kristen coming over last year kind of showed us sort of a glimpse of possibly that. And then you and Paige came out in the first event and kind of shut it down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask was, you know, it's just obviously it's one event, so there's a lot that can happen. Do you think that things are going to start shaking up this season with the European players coming over? And then what do you see kind of for the future of the FPO division as far as the parity of that division is concerned, with it, you know, becoming more like we saw the MPO leaderboard be separated by like one stroke, like 20 spots down? Like, how is that going to start to happen within the FPO division?
I think we might see, you know, and I think also Vegas is, we play from the same tee as the men, and Paige and I have been doing that for years and years and years. So I think we can, sometimes they can be boring holes, like throw it 370 feet, throw an 80-foot up shot. Sucks. It's a, you know, reachable hole, but there's greens and you just have to play golf and be smart.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think we might see it possibly more where we get on these courses where the Disc Golf Pro Tour gives us shorter pads, and that can kind of bring everybody in, or the wooded courses, because in my opinion that can kind of tighten things up due to you know, the woods and what woods golf brings. I thought we would see maybe it closer, like you said, like the men's field was at Vegas, but to be honest, I try really hard just not even to think about it because I find if I'm like, oh, this course really suits a longer sidearm and this person has a sidearm, and I'm getting into all that, as opposed to just like, how am I going to attack this course, or how am I going to attack the tour week to week? What are my small goals I'm doing? You know, like I said, getting hours on the putting green, or staying in the gym, staying on my diet, things like that help me. But so I don't know. We'll see. Because like I said, I would have thought that in Vegas we were going to see like 3 or 4 of us coming down the stretch. But I think the thing that fans and people don't realize either is when I say Paige and I have been on tour for like 12 years, that's 12 years of playing like 30 some tournaments and being out on the road full time, as opposed to just like, so I don't know. I think that might become a factor for the Europeans. You're away from home, you're in a different country, and the grind is no joke out here. As much as like, I absolutely love being on tour. It's a different mindset that I don't think people factor in. It's a grind for sure.
Yeah, and I suspect that as the season goes on and the European players get a little more comfortable, we will see it tighten up a bit. But
for sure,
at the same time, when you're talking about the field as a whole, it's probably just a matter of time. You know, as more athletic female players get into the sport and continue playing, it will start to tighten up at the top, and that's just kind of how it works. But we're definitely looking forward to it from a fan's perspective. It makes sense to why for you. I mean, it's been great. So
right, yeah, and I feel like it. You know, I think I said this earlier, maybe in press conference or post round. Like, it just fuels me to stay. Like, there's no slacking. You know, like I have to get up. And I'm probably going to go putt in the 27-degree weather here in Sioux Falls. So, like, you know, like I think it's just going to, you know, keep elevating the game, and it's just going to push me to be, you know, more disciplined. And so I think it's obviously a great thing, and it's great for the fans, and it's great for, you know, you can have 2 stacked cards in the FPO division. That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, for sure. Well, before we let you go,
Okay.
I wanted to kind of have a little DGA plug for you because
Okay.
we actually just got a shipment in today of DGA, and I got to get
Okay.
my hands on your proto disc and everything and kind of
Okay.
feel everything out. So for everybody listening, what are the 3 DGA molds that they need to have in their bag? What's like the must-haves?
Okay. So I would say a Rift for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think it is, like I'm sometimes throwing it like 360, 370, and I did not know that was possible with a mid range. I mean, that's
Wow.
kind of
Yeah.
like, maybe a little tailwind or whatever, but it just glides, but has like such good stability. So I would get a Rift. Gosh, because I have 3 signature discs. But
Yeah, you're allowed to plug all
right?
3 of your signature discs.
So I would say grab a Sail or my Proto. They're both. I can roll them both, but I can also hyzer flip to late turn them.
Okay.
And that's actually what we made the Vortex for. Is I wanted to be able to grab a disc, not have to beat it in for 2 or 3 years. Just grab it off the shelf, aim left, lots of hyzer, and then just let it glide over with not a lot of action. And so that's why I love the Vortex. And then I would say, man, this is tough. They have so many great discs.
The one that I saw you throwing the most that I was interested in was that light blue torrent. That you kept going to.
Oh my gosh. And here we go. So Tyler, our marketing guy, lives for the torrent. And the fact that we're talking about right now, he once he watches this, he's probably going to share it and be like, see, the torrent is the best disc. And we've never not done a live or a YouTube or interview where Tyler doesn't bring up the torrent, even if we're talking about discs. But yes, the torrent is very fast. The ones I have a lot of glide. I couldn't tell you what to compare it to, but it will more than likely end up being my go-to distance driver. I'll definitely use the Hurricane. It's more overstable for me. And I think a lot of players with faster arm speeds would love the Hurricane as a go-to. But I find I can get easier distance with the torrent. And I prefer to hyzer flip, so I can throw it out there with some hyzer.
Right. Yeah, I've thrown the Hypercane, I've thrown the Hurricane, but I have not checked out the torrent yet, but I definitely want to give it a throw.
Yeah.
But all right, everybody, you've heard it here first. Those are the discs to check out. You got to get them in your bag, the must-haves.
Yep.
But Catrina, thanks so much for joining the show. Everybody's going to be wishing you the best of luck for the rest of the season and hope to see some more wins out of you.
Okay. Thanks for having me, Trevor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. See ya.
All right, and thanks once again to Catrina Allen for joining the show. It was awesome to hear about her win and just learn a little bit more about her switch to DGA and all the things that have been going on for her this season. Make sure to check us out again next Thursday. We're going to have another awesome guest. You don't want to miss it.